Let's start. We are here, EDI Exposed. It is our first episode. I am your host, Lewis Howell, and I would normally be joined by my amazing co-host and colleague, Natalie, who unfortunately isn't able to join us for today, but future episodes, she will be here. And I am joined by an incredible person. This is Emma Collins from British Land, who is head of marketing specifically for offices and spaces, if I am correct. And Emma has, in fact, I would like for you, Emma, if it's okay, to tell us a little bit more about you, because I don't know if I'm going to quite do it justice, but you've had an incredible career, in my opinion, from the work that you've done with different retail brands, for example, launching Pandora in this country. And I know you're a very humble individual who won't want to talk too much about it, but taking it from literally 1 million to 400 million, to be part of the team that was able to achieve that is a sensational achievement. And I think, some of the other achievements that you've had in your career working across different countries with different companies is phenomenal. But I'm saying a lot and I want you to introduce yourself. So yeah, tell us a little bit about you, Emma.
Well, first of all, that's a really lovely introduction. So thank you. I will stress that this is always teamwork. Marketing is a group effort with a number of different departments. So whilst it's lovely to hear that, it is just to stress that it's not all on me. Background wise, pretty standard stuff. Grew up in mixed household, which I think you probably find quite interesting. My dad's white Londoner. My mum is a black Southern African.
Okay.
So that kind of sets the scene as to what my household was like. I studied, I worked hard, I went to university, did languages of international business, and then landed in the city as an assistant at a law firm.
Okay.
And that's how it built. The comms and the marketing piece built over time, and spent quite a bit of time in and out of this country in different businesses, but always different sectors, always focused on marketing.
Wow. And just so before, I know we're here to talk specifically about equity, diversity and inclusion. And I need to tell people a bit more about what this podcast is going to be about, because this is our first episode. And that's why I'm so honored that you were willing to do this, because quite often when I approach people for things, I like to kind of show them, well, this is an example of what you're going to be doing, but I couldn't do that with this. So I appreciate you trusting.
I trust you, yeah.
That's what I was just going to say. I really appreciate you trusting it. But before we do get into the EDI specifically, what interested you about marketing so much early on in your career and even up to this day?
It's always about people versus being about you.
Yeah.
So everything that I've worked on has been about how do you understand those particular people and drive it from a commercial perspective. It's always been in a business environment. I have done a bit on social enterprise. But I think if I wasn't in marketing, I probably would have studied something like psychology or behavior. It would always been around people. But I'm really fascinated by people and what makes them tick.
100%. I mean, I used to run a small marketing agency some years ago, and it was targeted at micro businesses. So, a small business really targeted at those really, really small businesses.
Yeah.
And similar to you, I just found marketing amazing. To this, even though I don't run the agency anymore, I'm still fascinated by the world of marketing and what happens within it and how, it influences behavior and how it can be used for different purposes across our society, because marketing is used within everything. We're still, I guess, somewhat coming out of a pandemic, right? And you have to think about all of the messaging that had to go out to society to try the very best to keep us safe during that time. All of that is, communications that falls under marketing in some ways, right? So yeah, fascinating stuff. So we are here for EDI Exposed. And as I've said, and as people can see behind us, the whole goal of this podcast, in my opinion, is to try and really lift the veil on how EDI is executed across organizations, because don't get me wrong, phenomenal books exist. Don't get me wrong, phenomenal videos exist, phenomenal courses exist, phenomenal content exists for people to be able to, in theory, start to understand what's needed in order for equity, diversity and inclusion to become a reality within organizations and within our society. But quite often when those conversations are being had, we're talking about the ideals, whether that's where we want to be. Sometimes it's, and which is necessary, spaces for people to vent, to kind of say, this is what still frustrates me, which is fine. What I want to start to get into in this podcast really though is how do we navigate the day-to-day in an organization? Because some people like this terminology, some people don't, but I still use the terminology that EDI is a journey. And I don't believe that any organization should feel bad about the fact that they're not necessarily where they want to be right now, because the whole point is that you're consistently looking for areas that need continuous improvement. And so I have these 6 areas just as prompts, but, being data led, thinking about how you educate people on the journey of equity, diversity, and inclusion in an organization. How does governance play a part? How do we make good decisions? And how do we recruit effectively and put in place good policies? Those are just some areas that I think are worth exploring, but we may go in many different directions. Okay. So, yeah. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this, Emma? Ready. That's good. Cool. So our first segment, and I hope people start to enjoy this as we go through this, is called No Laughing Matter. Now, the funny thing is, I'm hoping that what we do with this segment with each guest will be something that we'll want to laugh about.
Yeah.
However, it could be a meme, it could be a video clip, it could be a picture, it could be even just a story, something that has happened recently that we thought actually that was a really good example of where EDI shows up in day-to-day life or gave us a perspective. Now, before I play my clip, something happened when we were setting up for this that you pointed out straight away in regards to these microphones, which might be, it's a laughing matter, but it's no laughing matter. Do you want to tell people?
Well, the microphones are set up for buttons on a male shirt than they are female shirts. So I've got, you can see the on button, well, relatively clearly, but it just shows how the world is
so
not completely set up for women yet.
No. And it's so funny because me and Ria film for our other podcast and she's not brought it up. Do you get what I mean? Yes, but then I'm thinking, though, maybe she hasn't worn a shirt though when we film. Maybe that's why. So she's been attaching it to like the lapel on a sweater or a jumper or something. So maybe because she hasn't worn a shirt necessarily, she hasn't picked up on it. But that is so interesting. It's no laughing matter, but it's a laughing matter at the same time. That's crazy. Listen, I don't know who the brand is that these microphones are made by, but no disrespect, but do better. Do you get what I'm saying? Do better. Think about whether the
which
clip
way
can
around
twist.
It goes.
Maybe it can twist. Maybe they should make the clip part be able to twist so that you can wear it on both sides. Something. I don't know.
I'm not going to mess around with it.
I don't know what the design is, but still. But here's the clip that I want to bring to us, Emma, right? And I'm hoping that we get the sound through on this as well. Let me just check the sound settings to make sure that we will get it because the sound is going to be very important. So this is a clip from, we got it. So this is a clip from the film, Zootopia is what it was called in the States, and I think here it was called Zootropolis. Okay. So that is true, yeah. So this clip is from Zootropolis, which I think you said you've seen as well.
Well, my kids love it.
And there you go. So we're going to watch, whether we watch the whole minute and 45 or so, I think it is, or whether we stop it a part way through. But we're going to talk about just what we can learn from this particular clip. So here is where Judy Hopps meets Nick.
Officer, I can't thank you enough. So kind. Really. Can I pay you back?
Oh, no. Much. It's just, it burns me up to see folks with such backward attitudes toward foxes. I just want to say you're a great dad and just a real articulate fella.
Oh, well, that is high praise. It's rare that I find someone so not patronizing. Officer
Hopps. Mr.
Wild. Nick Wild.
I stood up for you, and you lied to me. You liar.
It's called a hustle, sweetheart. And I'm not the liar. He is.
Hey! Oh, right, Nick. You're under arrest.
Really? For what?
Gee, I don't know. How about selling food without permits, transporting undeclared commerce across rural lines, false advertising?
Permit? Pursuit of declared commerce. Hey, it's Officer 2.
Actually, it's Officer Hopps, and I'm here to ask some questions about a case.
What happened here, mate? Someone steal a traffic cone? It wasn't me. Hey, Carrots, you're gonna win the baby. I gotta get to work.
This is important, sir.
I chose that clip is because the whole film, I think, is sensational in terms of exploring implicit and unconscious bias, how it explores the themes and topics of prejudice and discrimination. But even just a few things in that clip, you can see how it relates to the real world. We're talking about animals here, but how I view the film is that the predators in Zootopia, which, you know, Nick being a fox would technically be a part of, they are seen as, in the eyes of the animals that would fall into the prey category, in which case the bunny does, they are seen as like the enemy. They are seen as just bad automatically because of the label.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, I looked at the clip and I thought, she's there doing something else. She just heard the fox and her senses went up. Let me go and see what he's doing. Why have you got immediate suspicion towards someone that's just on the street minding his business? We didn't see it in this clip, but he's just going into the store to go and buy an ice lolly with his friend, which he passed off as his son, yes. But with his friend, he's just going to go and buy an ice lolly. But then what's funny is the elephants in the store, which we don't see in the clip, but they're like, no, you're not allowed to shop here. Why is he being discriminated against on that front? But then it's, oh, you know what? You're actually such a stand-up, articulate fella. We see that in the real world where, you know, oftentimes it could be people from racialized backgrounds who are not necessarily assumed to be able to be so well at speaking the English language that get told as a compliment, oh, you're so articulate. And I've received that. And I've kind of thought, well, what did you expect? Like, I was born and raised here. Did you expect that I was not going to have a grasp on the language that is actually my primary language, my first language? And you think to yourself, how condescending. Why is it an assumption that I won't have a grasp on this language? Do you know what I mean? So there's much more. But yeah, tell me your thoughts though, Emma.
I think you picked up on something really interesting, which was labelling.
Yeah.
And the choice, or there is a choice or a decision to decide to live up to that label or to keep breaking some of those barriers. So whilst what I like actually about the whole film is it does turn the tables by the end.
Yeah.
And there is a learning in it for
100%.
children. But it is that piece of, can you be strong enough to break the label or let the label fall away to allow you to achieve your best?
That's it. And I think, because labeling, which happens on a societal level, and happens, you know, as we often say, as a result of systems. Like, don't get me wrong, as individuals, we uphold the systems that exist, of course. However, oftentimes people's implicit and unconscious bias, or even their willingness to label, isn't always necessarily just a personal decision at first.
Yes.
It may become one over time, but isn't usually a personal decision. Usually it is a result of what's happening structurally. And I think it's worth pointing out here as well, we're not necessarily just talking about what might seem the obvious thing. Like, for example, somebody in the majority population within this society, which would be white British, being you know, discriminatory towards someone who's from a racialized background. It can also work where me as a black man, I could label people from my own community if I'm not careful. As a result of the society I've lived in, what I've consumed may even cause me to, and I use this example a lot when I run workshops, but I could go into a school where the teachers have labeled young black boys a certain way. And if I haven't done the work to, you know, deconstruct where the things that I've consumed come from a biased perspective, I might go in there and actually treat them in a way that lives up to the label given by someone else. So a lot of these things are a result of structural dynamics and systems that exist. But as you say, we have to do work to start to think about, if we are the ones who have been labeled, what do we want to live up to, as you rightly said? And if we are the ones who maybe have found it very easy to label, what are we doing? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think if we're all honest, we're all guilty of labeling. It's how far do you take it, and what are the opportunities that you can create in your own space.
Yeah, but it's the time for that personal reflection. And that ability to have also potentially some challenging conversations, be it with colleagues, friends, family members, to where we can start to really break down, well, where did we develop these ideas, these perspectives, these viewpoints, these belief systems, values, etc., and then start to ask ourselves, and what is it that how do we want to operate going forward?
Definitely self-reflection in there.
So important. Self and collective.
And collective, too. Absolutely.
So that was No Laughing Matter, people, which I'm hoping you all found intriguing and hopefully took something from that as well. And please never think that these films, which, you know, in fact, it's interesting that you said it's a great message by the end for children. The reason I use that clip is because I believe that film's got a great message for all human beings, which often children films do. And it's interesting because I have been thinking about this for a few years. I can't remember if I mentioned this to you when we spoke a few weeks back, but I've been saying for a while that I'd love to have a program whereby I'm calling it an EDI film club, right, effectively, whereby we can get colleagues from a organization or a few together to be able to take a film like Zootopia and watch small clips each week and then kind of reflect and break down what's going on there and how does that show up in the workplace, stuff like that. And we actually have this year got the opportunity to do that with another business later in the year, which I'm excited for. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm interested to see how do people take to this. And I'm starting with Zootopia, so I'll keep you in the loop
Let me know
as to how it goes.
Yeah,
I will, for sure. So we're going to move into our next segment. And this is where we now have the opportunity to really get into, you know, what are some of the things that are happening within British Land that, by the way, I'm not saying you're a part of every single thing to do with EDI and British Land. Like, you know, let's be honest, as you said before, it's very much a team effort, you know, and absolutely. I know you will always come back to that. But let's start just broadly with what are some of the things as it relates to equity, diversity and inclusion within British Land that you're really proud of, things that maybe in your time here you've seen improve, if progress be made. And yeah, then what we'll probably do is explore a bit like how was that achieved as well?
Yes, so you start with a really big question. Look, there's huge amounts of progress that's made. And I keep coming back to, you work with people who are kind, you work with people who will listen, who will take the time to spend time with you. That's the starting point. Okay. Then when you look at it from how I feel is there's three parts. Welcome people, make them feel included, make them feel safe.
For sure.
So that's before you even got to the part of protected characteristics. So if I have a look at the team, the office's marketing team as an example, we value diversity of thought because we value that there will be challenges across the table. And almost if everyone's in agreement around the table, we probably haven't had the right discussion. It's those types of, that's your starting point. And then naturally you end up finding people who have different viewpoints and they come to the table. That means that your characteristics, whilst it defines part of your character, part of who you are, it's not the only reason that you're there. You have all the technical ability, but the differences of opinions that come from diversity of thought are what's valued as a starting point, and then naturally people come to the table who are going to be from diverse backgrounds.
Definitely.
And if I take that into British Land, I mean, I'm a really good example. I'm not real estate through and through. I've worked in quite a few different industries from a marketing perspective. Over 7 years ago, they could have taken the decision to say, actually, you're not real estate. This is not going to work.
Okay.
And chose not to. So I wouldn't be somewhere for over 7 years if I didn't feel that I could fit, I could work well, I could get on with the people. So it does, once again, come back to people and who you work with.
100%. So the biggest thing for me about what you said there is an underlying set of values and beliefs about what kind of workplace we are developing and what kind of business we are building.
Yes.
And it is a business whereby we highly, highly appreciate and prioritize diversity of thought. But in terms of some of those values that sit alongside that, so that's a belief system, but the values that sit alongside that, as you said, being welcoming, being kind, ensuring that people do feel that they can actually show up as their best self in this space. And so once you have those things and people are truly bought into it, they're not just words. I think you're differentiating the value being a word and being an action, right?
Well, exactly. It demonstrates what how business needs to be. And let's go back to what British Land do. We create places, you know, if you take London, take Broadgate Regents and Paddington, the mix of people, the melting pot of people means you need a diverse group.
Of course.
And we are a large organisation, small workforce, you probably come to that bit in a time. So we work with a number of different suppliers and partners. So that impact means it's pretty broad, but you're always thinking about what are you creating, what legacy are you going to be leaving, and what place do you want to create for people to come to? And ultimately, it's a very mixed space.
Of course, and I think because you've got in mind that last point you made, which is who are the community members that we want to be able to use these spaces or want to see using these spaces for different purposes? Because, you know, when you're creating places that people prefer, when you're trying to create places that people can effectively, you know, operate their lifestyle.
I like that you got our strapline in.
yeah.
Thank you.
So that's how you know I'm a real partner to the organization. Do you know what I mean? Like genuinely, because obviously we've had a relationship with British Land now for like 4 years. So these things probably are in my lingo. They're in my lingo. They're embedded. You get what I mean? So well done to the marketing team because it's embedded. You get what I'm saying? But when you're creating places people prefer, when you're creating places that people can operate their lifestyle within, from their ability to work, their ability to socialize, all of that. You then have to be intentional about, well, how do we develop the kind of organization that will understand the experiences we want people to have? And if we don't have individuals who can relate to that, who have the lived experiences, who represent those particular communities, then it becomes very challenging to do that effectively, right?
Absolutely. And it comes back to understanding, going back to understanding your audience, understanding your customer. And recognizing that you work with so many different stakeholders. You just want to make sure you've got that the mix behind to get the right information and make the right decisions
Without a doubt.
At the time.
Without a doubt. I mean, you use decisions there, so maybe we'll see if there's anything in relation to decision making that we can kind of talk more about. But when you think about some of the things that have been done really well, especially through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion across the business, and it could be in terms of, internal activity to do with the creation of opportunity, removal of barriers, or it could be stuff that's more customer facing. So to do with actually how different stakeholders were engaged, and it led to an even better outcome for customers and users of spaces. But is there anything around how a really good decision was made, in your opinion, through your time here, that was influenced by an awareness, an appreciation, and understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
So, yes, I feel really proud of a project called NDT Broadgate.
Okay.
And so that was in collaboration with New Diorama Theatre, which is at Regent's Place, one of our campuses. And in the middle of COVID, we had a phone call, or Anna Devlin from the social sustainability team had a phone call to say, we need to find some space for creative production companies. They've lost everything. Okay. And that means that's going to impact what goes out into theatre. And actually, those that are really impacted form part of global majority. So we managed to find space with at Broadgate, which was 2 floors, so that creators could keep going. It was in an office block, so it was a very unusual thing to be doing, or predominantly office block. It had hundreds of productions came out of it. Over 1,000 people were employed, but they've gone on to go into the West End or other parts of the country to show their work. And that would have been a complete stop if there hadn't been any support.
Of course.
I think the biggest piece for me is being able to use what we're strong at, our space, to be able to give that to a group of people who are struggling, need some support, and say, use it.
Yeah.
And then fortunate enough, we were able to have a look at some of the stats around it. One of the great things about, the great things, it's not the right thing to say, is when everything stopped, you've almost got this opportunity to test things in a way you could never test anything. So we were able to see what was the impact once creators came into a certain space on, say, spend within that area. And we were then able to look at what happened to UK economy when those productions went into theatre. So it generated 40 million.
Imagine.
And you almost got a perfect research base.
100%.
So I think sometimes, even in the toughest of times, there's an opportunity to take a decision that you can learn from, and even injecting some of the technology around what they were doing, it gave us a slightly different opportunity. And that's in a time when people weren't in central London. They weren't. It's almost forgetting it now, if that makes sense. So I feel really proud of that, because that's where a business can use its strength to help do something that has an output that will just continue.
Do you know why that's a sensational example? For so many reasons. So I was thinking about it through the lens of decision making, and it was definitely a phenomenal decision. But it's interesting how the data played a part in that, because you were able to evidence the impact that one decision had, and how the provision of a resource, which you guys, I actually don't want to say have in abundance, because the truth is the resource is not abundant.
No.
You're choosing to make it available to people in a way to remove barriers.
Yes.
Which is amazing. So when we talk about asset-based approaches to improving society, that is a true example of taking an asset-based approach. The asset that exists in this case is space, building, infrastructure, which, for many people, they would have struggled to have access to, but British Land have decided, your team and others have decided, well, actually, there's an opportunity here for us to allow the people from this particular sector that are currently facing a challenge, of which you've identified the overwhelming majority were global majority individuals and or collectives and groups and organizations, to say, well, let's remove one barrier for them to see what it can do. And personal story related to that, because I imagine the timelines do overlap. So last week, Friday, we're filming on a Friday. Last week, Friday, I went to see For Black Boys for the second time.
Oh, this
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Here's where the story's going. Right.
So you know exactly.
Right. So I went to see For Black Boys for the second time. So I saw it last year when it was in, what was the name of the theatre on Shaftesbury Avenue? I can't remember what theatre it was in then. But I saw it last week at Garrick, which is by Leicester Square and Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
And when I went to see it last year, I went to see it with just a group of different friends. But a lot of people from the charity that I volunteer with, 100 Black Men of London, had also gone to see it in the same run.
Right.
Because I don't know how the 100 had arranged, but you know, sometimes there are initiatives whereby Black-led groups might get the opportunity to get discounted tickets because they're trying to increase the number of people from the Black community who go to see theatre productions, especially those working with young people, because they want to introduce young people early.
Yeah.
So when they were going, I was thinking, oh, that's great. And when I went to see it, I was like, oh, this was so good. And I was telling somebody at the 100 that I would gone to see it last year. And she was like, I said, oh, did you go to see it? And her name's Maureen. Love Maureen. She's the most amazing woman ever. I was like, yeah, Maureen, I went to see For Black Boys. And she went, oh, yeah. Remember when I saw it before and you got me that ticket? So what are you talking about? I didn't get you a ticket. She goes, yeah. Don't you remember when it was at New Diorama Theatre and I went to see it and you gave me that ticket? Do you know what happened, Emma? Adonica from British Line, shout out to Adonica, phenomenal woman as well. Adonica had let me know that there were some spare tickets available that they could offer to certain community groups.
Right, yeah.
She got in touch with me to say, does anybody from the 100 want to go? I couldn't go, so I asked other people in the 100. Maureen said, yes, I forgot all about this.
Yeah.
I forgot that I did this. So For Black Boys was on at New Diorama Theatre. I didn't know. Maureen's gone, she saw it, and I remember her telling me after she did see it how amazing it was, but I forgot the name of the production. So when I went to see it and I'm raving about it, she said, don't you remember that I went to see it? I was like, oh my gosh, that was the same thing. She said, yeah. To see what it's gone on to do, that theatre show is honestly sensational.
It will end up in New York.
It has to.
Without a doubt. And just the trajectory is, well, phenomenal writer, phenomenal cast.
Yeah.
Cast has changed.
Cast has changed, but they are
phenomenal.
Wow.
In terms of ability, but you go from New Diorama Theatre, so NDT Broadgate, New Diorama Theatre, Royal Court, Sloane Square, into the Garrick, have both of those extended. 100,000 people have gone to see it. But if you think of it, when I look at it from a commercial perspective, it's that 100,000 people went to the theatre. They probably bought something in there.
Yeah.
So if you take on there is an element of, by providing this, it does drive business. There is business sense behind it as well. So whilst it is the right thing to do in making those decisions, that has become the poster child for success. But there's another over 250 that are there.
That's it.
Growing. But without a doubt, I'm not sure whether, I'd love to top that, but very proud.
But you know what's interesting about that? There is another theatre production that's doing really well in West End at the moment as well. That is a all-black cast and similar in nature in terms of how it uses few cast members, but it's telling a really powerful story. Red Pitch. And I was like talking to my fiance saying, oh, like, I want to go and see Red Pitch. She's like, but we saw it already. And I was like, what do you mean? We haven't seen Red. What are you talking about? Like, same story years ago when it was I can't even remember where we saw it. It took for her to break down the whole story for me of the show to be like, oh my gosh, we did see that. To now see that doing well in theatre, I think it's at Soho Place. And seeing that perform the way it's performing, I also think the reason that that's now getting its run in West End currently is probably because of the success of For Black Boys last year. I'm not saying it is for sure, but I would assume it's linked. Well,
it changes mentality, but I think what it highlights is working hard, consistency and talent.
Yeah.
There is almost this belief that it will trigger really quickly. It takes time.
Of course.
And along that journey, there will be helpers along the way. And if you can be a helper along that way, or an ally, when we talk about it from that sense, that's a really positive way to be.
Without a doubt.
But that comes back to what I was saying before of there is an element of kindness. I look for kindness in people. I look for honesty, integrity, but also a level of intent, because somebody that wants to find a problem will find a problem, but somebody who wants to overcome a problem will overcome it. And so it's people to people.
That is so interesting. Let's pick up on that last point. Somebody who wants to find a problem will find a problem. Somebody who wants to find a solution will find one. So I guess this brings me the opportunity to explore, where do you think there are still areas for improvement or progress as it relates to EDI within British land? And when I say within British land, again, I want to reinforce that that could include the relationship with different stakeholders, not always necessarily just the internal, but there might be things internally you want to pick up on. But yeah.
I mean, we spoke about this at the beginning, which is about this continuous improvement. I could not sit here and say every box is ticked, everything's fine. It's constantly changing. I would say there's a strong base, there's great people, there's great partners, there's great suppliers. We have a committee network, which is grassroots. You know, those structures are in place. What can't happen is getting caught up in noise.
True.
And when I talk about noise from a marketing angle of media.
Okay.
It's very easy to read things, watch things, and see things, and start from the base of everything's perfect over here, and this is really hard. But if you can meet on a level with people, you can overcome and you can create those solutions. And so, to give you an example on, discussion I was having earlier this week. What's the difference between equality and equity? Okay. And then we start going through what's the dictionary definition of it. And that's noise, okay? And it's very important to define this. But if we are trying to understand what those words are, we've probably missed the point of what is it that we want to build? What will make us successful, and what helps demonstrate that? Because actually, when I look at businesses that I want to work with or work for, I'm interested in the whole picture that they paint, which is I will be interested in the policy documents and what is churned out from a communication perspective, but I also want to see a strategy in action, which could be seeing somebody post something on LinkedIn, it could be seeing an interview, it could be seeing this podcast, and that demonstrating your values and principles is the most important thing.
Without doubt. That's such an interesting point, because it makes me then think about, and this might be education related actually, now that I think about it, but some organizations and people definitely do tend to rely upon or fall into the potentially negative spiral of dwelling upon, like, well, what's the language we're using, especially when it's not externally facing, but really what it's doing is it's halting, and it's halting the action, and therefore allowing them to stay in a comfort zone where action doesn't have to be prioritized, because they're thinking, well, we can't do action yet because we need to work out what equality and equity mean, and we can't do action yet because we need to define this, we need to change this policy, and we can't do action yet because it sounds like.
But this is where I would say, over 7 years here, you can have those discussions in the background, you can work through it, and you can keep moving at the same time. And I think that's the bit of,
what's the balance? How do you encourage the action at the same time, in your opinion?
Well, in a marketing sense, this is about who do I bring to the table? Who do I ask for help? Who do we work with?
Okay.
Those decisions are made all the time, and they do sit under a governance structure. Going back to Entity Broadgate, we had one of our best asset managers, Becky Gardner, working from commercial. It's like, bring people in and work together and talk through it. So I think the communication amongst colleagues within a business is a really good example of continuing to do that well.
Yeah.
And it takes time to figure this stuff's changing all the time, and don't be afraid of it, actually. And this is when I talk about feeling welcomed, included, and safe. We have to be able to talk and have some of the tough discussions.
Of course.
And going back to my childhood, growing up in a mixed household, we're not afraid of those discussions because it's built on love and trust, if that makes sense. Which actually sometimes when you come and go, oh, can I say that? Or maybe not. We need to get past that to move forward. And to do that, to get to a point where those challenging conversations can be had is only possible when, as you've rightly said so many times, you have a culture that everybody buys into where, look, we appreciate the diversity of thought, and therefore that's going to come with challenges. Some people are not going to agree, and that's cool. But we're going to go on this journey together of having the discourse to get to the point whereby we can then take an action. Yeah. And we're all going to learn in the process. We know we're doing it for the right reason. And I've got lots to learn. So I'm not, I sit here with some of the protected characteristics, but not all of them. Yeah. The other day was sat in a discussion on neurodiversity. I don't know a huge amount about it. I'm grateful that the discussion was taking place in the office. I wouldn't necessarily be exposed to that. So I think keeping that alive and keeping that going is really important whilst we work out what is it we need to do, because it's never going to be achieve this and you've done it.
100%. Do you know what? Yeah, you just reminded me of something. It's just more of a sidebar, but I'll say it here to hold myself accountable. One segment I do want to add to the podcast, which we don't have to do today, unless something comes to mind for you as I say this. But one thing I do want to add to as a segment to this podcast is almost like something I learned recently as it relates to EDI, because I know, like you, I also believe, regardless of how much work we do with organizations from all different sectors, helping them on their EDI journey, from running training to consultancy to all of that, I'm also like you, like, I don't know everything. And I genuinely believe I still have loads to learn. So I am obsessed with trying to find new ways to onboard new information, to develop my knowledge base, to develop my skill set. And I was thinking to myself, the podcast is a really good outlet to be able to share, because I'm a big believer in, whether people agree with it or not, that concept of the learning pyramid, whereby you will only learn so much, for example, if you just listen or you just read. To get to the highest point of learning is when you put yourself in a position to have to teach. And so I think the podcast is a great outlet to say, how can I organize new information that I've onboarded in a way to be able to deliver in a way that's easily digestible, that will cause me to then embed that learning better myself. So it's got benefits to the people listening, but also selfishly, it helps me to feel like I'm learning more by having to package that. Do you know what I mean?
Wait, I mean, we're breaking the idea that you do all your education at the beginning and then you know everything and you go. And I think that cycle's going to change considerably where we learn new skills.
100%. 100%.
So it's that continuous learning piece. I know it's starting to become a little bit buzzwordy. If you don't learn something new, that's a bit of a shame, really, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, and when you think about all of the different protected characteristics, in terms of the very nuanced and niche challenges that will be faced, some of which will be physical, some of which will be social, some of which will be emotional, mental, etc., there is always an opportunity to learn something new about how the workplace can be improved for people based on those particular protected characteristics, especially when they are those that we don't have. Do you know what I mean? So I think, there's so much in there that we can just continuously be learning. And I'm just thinking now whether there's anything specifically that I've learned as of recent that really stood out to me that I can share in this episode. If something comes to me later on, I'll share. And same if anything comes as well. But there was something that you mentioned that I wanted to come back to very quickly, which is your whole focus is on who am I bringing around the table? And you mentioned it in and around the same topic of the way in which governance structures work. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm a big believer that governance is massively important, of course, for any organization to run. Interestingly, I think because of the way we use governance in our language, people might think that governance is about the level someone is at determines whether they can be part of a governance function. From what I understood from what you said, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, in British land, being part of a governance function or process is not determined by the level you're at. Actually, you could be somebody who's quote unquote at a more junior level in the organization, but still be part of a governance function for the purposes of making a decision or moving us in a direction. Because actually having people with diversified experiences be part of that process is more important than just, well, let's get the most senior people to be part of that.
The world's changing.
Exactly.
In the sense of we all have a responsibility. And yes, governance structures do exist. I mean, this is financial business. There's regulation, everything. But I have a role to play in terms of what I want, in terms of delivery across what I do. I can't look at another part of the business and be like, well, they're not doing this, or and not take that on myself. And so I think sometimes the self-reflection is your own governance.
Of course.
And it probably sounds like it's not my role, or it's somebody else's role. And I think that's the issue, is it's not somebody else's problem or solution to come up with. We actually all have things that we can do ourselves, and we should just get on and do it. And so even if that is making sure that we're all you turn off, or try and turn off your unconscious bias, or ask questions, or if someone says something that you didn't quite expect, that you don't take offense to it, you just you probe a bit more. That's part of people management, but it's also part of understanding people.
Of course.
And when you go back to the places that we create, there's such a mix of people that come in. It's fascinating. It's really enjoyable to see how people use things in different ways, use places in different ways, that actually it's not a chore. It's just part and parcel of life.
But you know what? And there's something I want to pick up on about what you said before we go into our final segment. But I want to also say this. The fact that after all this time being at British Land, you still have that level of curiosity and intrigue about how people are using the spaces. I really admire that, because I'll give you an example. So we met last year when we were doing the work experience at Regent's Place.
Yeah.
And we were in the foyer area of 10 Brock Street on the British Land side, not the Meta side, obviously on the British Land side. And I could see straight away the way you were analyzing how these young people were probably experiencing that week in that space. And then you asked us questions about, so how did you operate in the space this week and stuff like that? And now I know that's going to be super helpful from a marketing standpoint, yes, but the fact that on an individual level, that level of curiosity still exists, that as a trait is so helpful, because it means that from, yes, your day to day in terms of moving forwards, the marketing objectives of the business is going to be better achieved, because curiosity is a big part of how we do that well. But also then when you think about it through the lens of EDI, again, curiosity is going to help massively in terms of, well, you know, why do we do this as a norm?
Yeah.
And how do we make things better for the people who maybe have been facing certain barriers in other parts of their careers or in other businesses, and we want to make sure they have a better experience here? Just that curiosity alone is going to be so powerful.
Oh, they were a great bunch. Like it was really lovely to come in. And I think it goes back to, did they feel comfortable? Like I wanted to know that answer.
Yeah.
Did they feel that when they came into that space that they could sit down, enjoy it, get the best from it? And the answer to that is so important, because this space is their space.
Of course.
And quite often listening and watching how people behave in space can give you so much information that it just helps me do my job better.
Well, we talked about that as you came today. Like I've been to Story Club maybe 3 times before, because we're obviously filming at the Story Club in Paddington Central, and
you know the whole portfolio.
yeah. So I mean, again, it's been a while, but even your suggestion actually for us to film in a space, because, you know, I was trying to be like really respectful of people's time and not make people feel like they have to travel somewhere. We can just do this online. And your suggestion of, no, let's do it in person, because at the end of the day, we have spaces for people to be comfortable and be able to do things in. So let's do it. But I want to pick up on a point you mentioned about comfort, in that every single time I've walked through those doors of 4 Kingdom Street, before I even get to Story Club, the way I'm welcomed by the team at the front desk, so loving.
Great. Yeah.
Today, like, I was going to go straight to, so they've got the new system now with the barcode that didn't exist until quite recently. So I was just going to go to the Story Club door, and he's like, oh, mate, you good? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to Story Club. And he said, have you got your barcode? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. That's what Emma made sure I had sent to me. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then I was like, oh, is this a new system? And he's like, yeah, it only came in recently. I said, oh, okay, nice. Then I come in, and obviously I'm welcomed by the team here, who I know really well, simply because we had a conference here a few months ago. And again, on that day, so helpful. Like, we faced a couple challenges on the day of that conference that they were phenomenal with helping us to overcome. That meant, in fact, I want to use your example. Not only did that conference go really well, because we brought together colleagues from across the youth sector in this country, people traveling from parts of Scotland and all different parts of the country to come to this conference. But what's now happening as a result of that conference is sensational. The activity that's been sustained since then, I always look back and I go, wow, imagine if we didn't bring those 60 people together that day, like in that space.
And it's that thread that sometimes I know that once we've got our space, British Land space, I'd like to know what happened. So the NDT Broadgate example is, I know what happened because I can work that out. And we know we're still talking, but that's a catalyst for change. Yeah. What happened with those 60 people as they went, and where did they go, and what happened?
Honestly, I'll have to give you the breakdown after we stop filming, but what's happening and will go on to happen, I can't even put a value. It's sensational. Like, it's genuinely, it's going to change the whole youth sector easily. And the intention is to do another conference to kickstart a similar solution.
And it's that whole piece of bringing people together. You then start to understand each other in a different way. You get the body language, it will always, in my opinion, outweigh doing something online.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's, let's not forget that bit. It's that person to person that you don't necessarily, we're not quite there yet from a tech perspective. Yes, it does make things a lot easier, but you can be inspired, you can feel the energy, you can come up with different ideas. It bounces in a different way in a room or in a place.
And most importantly, going back to the point I made about why I admire your curiosity so much, is because when you share that space with people, especially those from different communities and backgrounds, what you also get is the opportunity to explore how the atmosphere and or culture you create in a particular space, what impact does it have on different people and their willingness and ability to feel that they can show up, contribute, etc. So even from an EDI standpoint, if we are intentional about creating an atmosphere and a culture where we accept that it's not something that we have to dictate what the atmosphere and culture is, but we encourage everybody to participate in the creation of the atmosphere and that culture. Usually what that does automatically is gives people the comfort and feel okay with, well, I can just show up and be me then.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But one thing I'll tell you that I loved even more is when the session had finished, we got talking, then I went outside and 2 of the students were playing on the table tennis. And I thought, brilliant. So not only did you feel comfortable here, you felt comfortable to go out, pick up the bats and just start playing.
Some of them were playing chess that week, you know, the giant chess. They were using the space.
And that's our, you know, our teams on site, the property management team there, making sure that those things are out so people can just enjoy.
Exactly.
That wouldn't necessarily appear on a report, but going down and seeing how people interacted is really important.
Massively powerful, massively powerful. Okay, because of time, I'm going to bring us to our last segment, which is, but this has been such a good conversation. There's so much more we could talk about. I'm so confident. But the part for me with this segment, which is just kind of like, what are some of the things that maybe when you're on your own or when you're, you know, away from work even, but things might come to your mind, as what things are still on your mind as it relates to things that could still be improved, or things that maybe you still have as like we haven't quite cracked that yet, and how are we going to do it? Like, what's something that still runs on your mind as it relates to EDI? And I would love for you to comment on that. Yes, in regards to British Land's journey, but it might also be things on a societal level that still, you know, you're thinking about.
It's on, well, both levels, societal and British Land. I am the data piece, the AI piece, the tech piece, the who are in those numbers that you're representing and having a look at. I think that worries me, lack of trust. So I go back, marketing and media and all the information that's coming at you all the time. How does that play out in terms of how you manage business communications, marketing campaigns? Where's that source of truth that people are going to get? And if topic of the day at the moment is AI and how that's going to impact, I do worry, I even saw it in the work experience piece, that when there was AI generated imagery, the students weren't necessarily represented in some of the imagery that was created. And I think that's a problem.
Of course.
And when you come back to, it's the law of averages, it's a law of average of information that's vast amounts of information. But if those vast amounts of information don't include certain groups of people, you've got a problem. So I believe, I'm really optimistic, we will overcome this. But if you're going to say, what would I lose sleep over? It is unfair representation. It's data being used that's not necessarily representative of everyone, which I think is a society piece of how that sits at a governance level internationally. And making sure that if you are that person, you don't feel as represented, that you feel that you can say something and you can make changes. It's not a side of, this is the way it is and it's always going to be that way.
Yeah, no, of course. That's such an interesting take as well on the role that AI currently and will go on to play, because I think a lot of conversations about AI cause us to, I feel they can be quite binary. You're either expected to be just like super supportive or super against it. But I really appreciate conversations that are about, well, let's just look at the middle.
I'm super supportive, but I think we still have to be sensible. Right?
So
you have to look at it and go, okay, don't take everything as truth, interrogate it a little bit. And so that's where are the sources coming in from. That's what I'm interested in. And I also believe that things are getting better. There's a really great book called Factfulness, which shows the world's getting better. You wouldn't necessarily think that on all levels, but your starting mentality of, I think this is going to go well, that doesn't mean to say you just hope it will go well. You still work hard towards it, but that has such an impact. The passion and the energy has such an impact on the outcome. Don't lose that bit.
Yeah, definitely. I just had a thought as you were speaking there, to close. And this is going to be putting you on the spot a little bit. And I'm hoping that it will work and also I'm taking this and I definitely know this is probably inspired subconsciously by Diary of a CEO. So big up to Stephen Bartlett because I love the podcast, but I actually do want to use a similar concept of what he does. So if you can think of one, I'd love for you to ask a question, whoever the next guest is going to be, relating to EDI. We don't know who that guest is going to be yet. I actually don't even know who the guest is going to be. I must be honest. I don't even know when I'm next filming yet. So we'll work that bit out. But anyway, we don't know who the next guest is going to be. But yeah, just a question related to EDI that you'd like to pose to them that I can ask them when we next record.
Oh, wow. You have put me on the spot. What question would I want to ask them? Very directly, what are you doing that is making things better or improving things? Because there is... I won't answer the question. I'll give you the question. You can see I won't answer the question.
No problem.
Too often we pass it over to somebody else to do something, and I don't think it is always that way. So let's see.
I'm going to make sure when I ask them, I emphasize the you. Yeah. So Emma was very clear. She wants to know what are you doing. Okay, fantastic. Well, listen, Emma, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you for also making the space available here at Story Club in Paddington Central. Beautiful space. And I'm glad that you appreciated the small setup that I did. But I didn't have to do much because the space is already sensational.
I think it's a great setup. I'm going to get a list of everything.
Yeah, no, 100%. No doubt about it. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Natalie, just so you know, you are loved. You're sorely missed. But I tried my best to hold the fort. You can let me know in feedback how I did today. And thank you all for engaging with this. This has been our first episode of EDI Exposed, and we are looking forward to you joining us for many more. See you soon.